Hello, class. Thought I'd do another granny reading today. Chapter 13. Isis, November 333 BC. And it starts out with the subheading, Charm's Mistake. How could Charm possibly make a mistake? She's such a delightful young lady. I'm not surprised. Quite spirited, that young one. Let's see. We made camp near the Syrian gates, but remained on full alert. The night had a prickly feel that made me tremble. My nerves were not helped by the fact that I was wearing my battle cloth with the purple trim. Charm had my bridle ready to put on me at short notice. Alexander's javelins and spear waited beside it for her to pass up to him. The big shield of Achilles was propped nearby. Demetrius was going to carry it into battle to show that Alexander had the power of Achilles. Alexander had sent scouts into the pass to keep watch for the Persians, and an expectant hush lay over the camp. Everyone listened for the trumpets that would signal the attack. While we waited, Charm combed my mane. It didn't need combing, but her fingers felt nice, so I didn't complain. Beside us, Tydeus fiddled with Ptasios's girth. Ptasios didn't think much of this and gave him flat ears and a little squeal. Suddenly, Charm's comb stopped moving and her fingers gripped my crest. "Do you think it's wrong to lie to save someone's life?" she said. Tydeus gave her a puzzled look. "What do you mean?" Alexander wanted to know which pass the Persians will come through. It wasn't really a lie. I might have dreamed it wrong. These passes all look the same to me. It's hard to tell sometimes. He saw her glance toward the Syrian gates, and his eyes went wide. "Are you saying what I think you're saying? Have you done something extremely stupid?" She bit her lip and rested her forehead against my neck. "I only wanted to stop the battle," she said in a whisper. "If the Persian army goes through to the other pass, then they'll miss us. We can carry on through the Syrian gates and get to Egypt without having to fight them." There was a silence, not even the sound of horses munching hay, because we hadn't been fed in case we had to gallop after the Persians. Charm lifted her face from my neck and looked at Tydeus with pleading eyes. "Oh, Zeus," Tydeus whispered, glancing around to check that no one else had heard. "Do you mean you dreamed of them going through the Ammanic gates?" Charm nodded miserably, and Tydeus paled. "You little idiot! What do you think King Darius is going to do when he discovers he's gotten behind us? Do you think he'll just lead the Persians north on through the Sicilian gates and into Anatolia, leaving his enemies in the mountains? Do you really think King Alexander is going to just ride toward Egypt without a fight? He's been looking forward to meeting the Persian king in battle for years, probably ever since that day he jumped onto Bucephalus's back when he was 12 years old." His voice rose. Some of the grooms glanced our way. Tydeus put an arm around Charm and steered her away from the horse lines, whispering fiercely. I wanted Charm to come back and continue combing my mane. Thunder rumbled in the mountains. Our grooms glanced up nervously. Xanthus shifted his big golden hindquarters sideways into Arion, and the two of them started a kicking match. I squealed at Xanthus to tell him to behave, but it made no difference. We were all far too tense. A message from King Darius. "The storm hits us in the night, and rain comes down so hard and violently that rivers of mud flow through the camp. Several tents are washed away. The men splash after their belongings, shouting and swearing. Charm and Tydeus and the other grooms have their work cut out, rescuing our tack and fodder and our riders' weapons from the flood. We horses hate every moment of it. My quilted battle cloth soon becomes sodden and clings to me as heavily as the horsemaster did on my first day in Pella. It makes my back so cold I start to shiver. Thankfully, Charm notices this and takes off my cloth to wring it out. The other grooms are following her example. when urgent shouts and trumpet blasts come from the side of the camp farthest from the pass. The dogs go crazy, barking and whining in a horrible way that makes my hair stand on end. The men look up from their rescue work in alarm. They're right to be worried. The sky is paling behind the clouds, and dawn is a favorite time to attack an enemy camp. The officers yell orders. The men strap on their armor and grab their weapons. The grooms hastily put our wet cloths back on us and tighten our girths. Charm gives Tityos a wild-eyed look. "Don't just stand there then," says Tityos. "Your dream about the Ammanic gates must have come true. The Persians are going to attack us from behind, just like I said they would. I wouldn't want to be in your sandals when the king gets down here." Charm shakes her head, very pale. They can't have had time to go through the Ammanic gates and bring the army all the way up here after us. It can't be them. It can't. But she is breathing hard, and I can feel the fear coming off her in waves. She tries to put my cloth back on me, but it's still wet and even colder than before. Her hands are trembling, which makes me nervous too. I give her flat ears and rear up to tell her I don't want it on my back yet. She ducks to avoid my hooves, and my cloth drops into the muddy stream running past the horse lines. Charm picks it up and says a bad word she learned from the muleteers. Into this chaos strides Alexander, followed by an alarmed Hephaestion. The king's face is flushed with anger. He is dragging a man with him by the elbow. I come down to earth and snort as I recognize the man's smell. It brings memories of the mule stable back in Pella, for it is the old mule master who helped Charm on her first day. We left him with the baggage train and the mares and the foals at the camp in Issus. Blood is running from a cut on his head, and his face is blank with shock. There's something wrong with his hands. His arms end too early, and the stumps of his wrists are covered in a sticky black mess that smells horrible. One of the younger grooms gives a strangled gasp and is sick in the mud. Alexander lifts the mule master's arm and waves the blackened stump at Charm. "See this?" he shouts in his shrill voice. "See? This poor man is just ridden all the way from Issus without his hands. King Darius took his army through the Ammanic gates in the night and attacked our base camp. He cut the hands off anyone strong enough to sit on a mule and sent them up here as a warning to me. He murdered the ones who couldn't ride, all my sick and wounded, butchered by the Persians. Now tell me again, Charmides, which pass the Persians were going to come through in the night?" All the blood has drained from Charm's face. My cloth slips from her hands. She stares at the muleteers' blackened stumps in horror. "I'm sorry," she whispers. "Oh, I'm sorry." It's not clear whether she's apologizing to the king or the mule master, but Alexander assumes her words are for him. In an icy voice, he says, "You will be." "Alex, for Zeus's sake!" Hephaestion hisses, glancing at Charm's white face. "It was only a dream. Your official seer gets it wrong all the time. How was your groom to know? I thought we came up here because of General Parmenio's intelligence reports, not because of some silly dream. Let the poor man go to the blood tent with the others. Maybe the doctors can do something for him." "Stick his hands on, perhaps?" Alexander shoves the mule master roughly away from him. "This man's useless to me now. How can he look after mules with no hands? I should have left my groom in the base camp instead." Charm shudders, but says nothing. I can see Tityos out of the corner of my eye, standing nearby with his fists clenched. The other grooms are too afraid to say anything. We horses are upset by the king's anger and tug at our halters as we dance around in our lines. "General Parmenio's coming," Hephaestion warns in a low voice, and Alexander shakes himself like a wet horse. "Get out of my sight," he yells at Charm. "Report to the garrison's kitchen in Tarsus, and don't let me see you near my horses again. Think yourself lucky I haven't had time now to deal with you as you deserve. You, Tityos, or whatever name Tityos, or whatever your name is, get that cloth back on my horse and get him ready for battle." Charm sucks in her breath and flings herself at Alexander's feet. "Please, your majesty," she gasps. "Please don't send me away. Punish me, whip me, anything, but let me stay and look after Bucephalus. He needs me." "No." Alexander's face twists as he looks down at her. "If you're here when I get back, being a girl won't save you. For the last time, go." "No." Charm is sobbing now. "You don't understand. You can't. Send me away, please." Alexander gives her tears a peculiar look, orders Hephaestion to make sure she leaves, and strides off to meet General Parmenio. As the general and the young king approach each other, they both make themselves huge. This is a certain sign that there will be a battle for the herd. But when General Parmenio says, "If we had waited at Issus as I advised, this wouldn't have happened," Alexander shoulders him aside. "Assemble the men, General," he orders as he strides past. "I want to talk to them. We can't change what's happened, but King Darius is going to pay for what he did to my people. Tomorrow, Persian blood will run as deep as the floodwater Zeus sent down on our camp last night." His tone is chilling. His fists clench, and energy flickers around him. When he glares back down the slope, he looks twice as frightening as he did on the day we dominated Thebes. "I swear it on my father's name." Charm went as ordered. I don't know where. Tydeus stayed long enough to put my cloth back on, then followed her. Meanwhile, the damp tents were packed and the men assembled on the mountainside. Alexander stood on a rock above them, wearing his reinforced Troy helmet with the white plumes, and talked. He said a lot of things about glory and honor in a loud, shrill voice. We horses soon got bored and we nosed around in the mud for something to eat, but the men, who had been badly frightened by the mutilated captives King Darius had sent them, stopped muttering, stood up straight, and gripped their weapons with fresh determination. When the king finally finished, they cheered wildly. When Alexander came to mount me, there was still no sign of Tydeus or Charm, so he had to bridle me himself. He vaulted onto my back without a word, and we took our usual place at the front of the army. At midnight, we saw the Persian fires glittering like stars below us. They filled the whole valley where we'd left Harpina with little hoplite and the baggage train. I flared my nostrils, but we were too far away to smell my mare. Alexander rode on ahead with Hephaestion, halted me at the edge of the cliff, and squinted at the Persian camp. He was silent for a long while, then he said, "Those poor men they sent back to us weren't exaggerating, my friend. I think they outnumber us, but not by much. It could be worse, but I must make the proper sacrifices tonight. We're going to need Zeus on our side tomorrow." Hephaestion reined in Patassios beside me. He said softly, "Are you sure it was wise to dismiss your groom back there, Alex? The other grooms are all scared of Bucephalus. You know that." Alexander frowned. "The last thing I need to worry about right now is who's going to look after my horse. Ask me again after we've beaten the Persians. Won't do the stupid girl any harm to spend a night in the hills. She'll soon come running back to us for protection when she sees King Darius's army down there." When we rejoined the others, Tydeus still hadn't turned up, so Alexander removed my cloth and settled me himself. Then he vanished into the night with Hephaestion to make his sacrifices. No one noticed that the king didn't know the proper order for the horse lines and had tethered me next to Xanthus instead of in my usual spot between Patassios and Borealis. Spies and assassins. Our grooms are all curled up in their cloaks, asleep. The men sit in groups, talking quietly as they sharpen their swords and spearheads. There's the sound of happy munching in the horse lines. All the other horses have hay soaked in honeyed water, our usual last meal before a battle. But Patassios and I are hungry because no one has thought to give us any. I reach my nose across to take some of Xanthus's hay. He gives me flat ears and a brazen squeal. I give him flat ears and a squeal back. Then snatch a mouthful anyway. I'm the boss, and he ought to let me have it. But the big fool goes up into the air, breaks his tether, and comes at me with bared teeth. So I break my tether too and fasten my teeth in his neck. Xanthus shrieks. The grooms wake up, but dare not come near my hooves and teats. Teats? But dare not come near my hooves and teeth. Some of the men run across and try to separate us by swinging their long pikes at our heads. It's like being back in the battle that half blinded me, and I wheel away in panic. I have no rider to guide me, and no one around me smells familiar. Some of the grooms, arms outstretched, make a half-hearted attempt to block my way, but when I bare my teeth and gallop at them, they jump aside. Their shouts fade as I flee into the night. By the time the ghosts stop chasing me, I'm surrounded by black rocks. I slow to a trot and snort to clear my nose. One of my forelegs has a little nick from a sharp stone. I'm high in the mountains, and the sky is paling over the mountaintops. I suck in the cold air and send a ringing whinny to my friends. Very faintly, off to my right, a strange horse replies. I sniff the ground, searching for familiar smells, but our army has not come this way. The strange horses have left dung, which I pause to dominate, and mixed with the smell of their herd is a familiar scent. Charm! I whinny again, this time with joy, and set off at a trot with my nose to the ground and my broken halter lead trailing, following her spring grass scent. I find the herd of strangers hiding in a canyon. There must be 100 of them, small, with dainty hooves like the ones we dominated at the Granicus. They're carrying riders dressed in trousers with yellow scarves wrapped around spiked helmets. Tassels dangle from their bridles and cloths. Some of the men in the center of the herd have dismounted. One of them is holding a small human by the arm. I can't see her, but I catch another whiff of Charm's spring grass smell. It's sharp with fear. I whinny in delight and canter toward them. The men look around in alarm and draw their long, curved swords. They smile when they see I am alone and call out to their boss in a strange tongue. One of them rides up to me and tries to catch my halter lead. I squeal at his horse, give its rider flat ears, and barge through the herd to reach my groom. Her face lights up. Bucephalus! I open my mouth and charge the man holding her. His horse spins around, dragging the reins from his arms. I fasten my teeth in his wrist. He lets go of Charm with a startled yell, and she runs to me, grabs my mane, and makes a leap for my back. She doesn't make it. I'm still acting wild because the strangers have surrounded us. They laugh at their boss and call to one another to catch me. Charm cowers by my shoulder and points her wavering dagger at the men. "Stay away from me," she says in a shrill, scared voice, "or King Alexander will come up here and kill you all." The Persians laugh. Their boss calms his horse and says in good Greek, "I don't think so. We have your young Alexander exactly where we want him, trapped between our army and the mountains. Now be sensible, girl. Tell us his plans and maybe we'll let you go back to him alive." Charm shakes her head. "I wouldn't tell you anything even if I knew. But I know he's going to make your horrid King Darius pay for chopping off our men's hands." The Persian boss eyes her dagger and my snapping teeth. He says something to his herd in his own language and smiles at Charm. "We don't anticipate much more trouble chasing your men back home, but if King Alexander has more women and horses in his army who fight like you two, maybe the great King Darius ought to be more worried." "King Darius should be very worried," calls a strong voice behind us. "Let the girl go. She is King Alexander's personal groom. If you harm a hair on her head, he will pursue you to the ends of the earth." The Persians stop laughing at Charm and me and whirl in alarm to face this new threat. Charm gives a cry of relief. Queen Penthesilea, I just don't know why I can't say that. Queen Penthesilea. I smell the Amazon horses and whinny to them. They remember me and whinny back. In the dawn light, ghostly blue circles show on their coats, and their little horns glint. The Amazons have daubed their own cheeks with blood. Their hair is braided tightly, and their war axes rest across their knees. Bows and quivers full of arrows are slung over their shoulders. The Persians stare in amazement at this Amazon herd. The Persian boss smiles widely. So, there are more of you. The Macedonian army is led by a boy, lets girls groom its horses, and sends women to fight its battles. On second thought, great King Darius doesn't have much to worry about after all. But thank you for telling me who this girl is, warrior woman. We'd hoped simply for information. Now perhaps your king will negotiate a ransom for his pretty groom. With a wild, warbling cry, Penthesilea sets her horse into a gallop, whirling her axe over her head. The other Amazons charge too, and there are thuds and cries as they battle with the Persian herd. A spray of blood hits me on my blind side, and a ghost ripples into the dawn. The men who were still on foot leap onto their horses. One of them tries to grab Charm and pull her up in front of him. She grips her dagger in a tight fist and stabs him in the leg. I bite his horse on the neck, and it wheels away in terror. A space opens around us. Charm finally struggles up onto my back, grabs my trailing halter lead, and drags my head around. "Go with the others, Charmea," Queen Penthesilea shouts, axing another Persian. Amazon horses surround me, and we are galloping again. It's very exciting. I charge through them, giving them all flat ears. By the time we reach the rocks the queen had indicated, Charm and I are in the lead, where we belong. We pull up, dancing and snorting. There's still a lot of yelling behind us. Most of the Amazon herd stayed with their queen to fight the Persians. The ones who came back with us stand guard around me, alert. Charm slides off my back and collapses in a little heap at my feet. I lower my head and snort into her mane. She's shaking all over. I graze a few stalks around her legs, and gradually she becomes calmer. The sun rises, bringing color to the mountains, before the rest of the Amazon herd joins us. Persian ghosts are still swirling and whirling away, but none of the Amazon ghosts have left their bodies because they are already on the outside. The scar on Queen Penthesilea's cheek pulses purple, and her face is spattered with blood. Her axe drips. "Spies and assassins!" Pah! She spits on the rocks. "King Darius sent them to raid the Macedonian camp for the king's horse and ordered them to block the Syrian gates in case King Alexander tried to retreat through them. I think they do not know King Alexander very well. They certainly did not expect to meet us." She hands the reins of her horse to one of her herd and kneels beside Charm. She's within reach of my teeth, but I back away, disturbed by her inside-out ghost. She puts her arms around Charm and holds her tightly. "They have gone," she murmurs. "You are safe now." Charm bursts into tears. Queen Penthesilea holds her until she stops crying. She pushes a curl out of Charm's eye, sighs, and says, "You have bloodied your weapon. You must wear the Amazon mark now." She wipes her finger through the wet blood on the blade of her axe and draws a red circle on Charm's cheek. "There, you are now a warrior." The other Amazons smile and give a cheer, but Charm struggles to her feet and smudges the mark with her palm. She shakes her head. "I'm not a warrior. I could never kill anyone like you did just now. I felt sick when I stabbed that Persian, but I didn't have any choice. Oh, Queen Penthesilea, I was so scared. I thought they were going to chop off my hands like they did that poor muleteer. But then Bucephalus came." She looks at me in wonder and whispers, "He came to find me." The Amazon queen gives her a steady look. "You didn't steal him then? You weren't running away?" "No." Charm's eyes go wide. "King Alexander sent me away. I was following the army, hiding in the rocks. That's when the Persians found me, and then Bucephalus—" She stares up at the sky. "It's morning. I have to get him back to the king before battle, but He said he never wants to see me near his horse again. Queen Penthesilea, what am I going to do? The queen looks at my broken halter rope. She nods. I believe you, and I think King Alexander will have to reconsider. I think you share the horse bond with Bucephalus as strongly as your king does, though I have never seen it work between a horse and two humans before. No wonder there is such power when the three of you are together. Those Persian spies could have done a lot of damage if they had captured you both. But it is too late. King Alexander has already begun his battle formation. He sent us up here because the scouts reported seeing Persian troops behind his line. Charm stares at her in horror. But he has to be properly mounted when he meets King Darius. He told me so himself. Then she looks at me and her face relaxes as she realizes I'm going to miss the battle after all. Who's he riding? Queen Penthesilea smiles. Let us go and see, shall we, young Charmea? Ghosts and rumors. Charm rides me at the front of the Amazon herd next to Queen Penthesilea's horse with its blue circles. As we descend through the clouds into the valley where the Persian fires burned last night, a great noise rises to meet us. War cries, shouts, screams, and the frightened neighs of horses. We flick our ears back and forth and flare our nostrils. We can smell the blood. Then a trumpet echoes from the mountainsides, and the sound makes me shiver all over. Charm winds her fingers into my mane and tightens the halter lead. Steady, Bucephalus, she whispers. Steady. Queen Penthesilea gives me a sideways look. I think this is close enough. We shall wait here. No, Charm says, gripping my mane tighter. I can manage him. I have to see Alexander. I have to see if he's winning. The Amazon queen looks hard at her, then dismounts with a sigh and takes the bridle off her own horse. Swap, she orders, handing it to Charm. I'm not going to be responsible for losing you on the battlefield because I let you ride Bucephalus in a halter. I don't like the Amazon bit because it tastes of a strange horse. But Queen Penthesilea pulls my ear, and between them they get the bridle on me. Charm remounts, and we follow a gully with a stream running down it. The rocks block our view of the battle, but I can smell that my herd went this way and take hold of the strange bit impatiently. I should be at the front, not the back. I wish Charm would let me gallop. Finally, we emerge onto a plateau near the coast and see the battle below us. It looks like the usual chaos. In the center, our phalanx is struggling against the Persian line. Our cavalry seems to be mixed in with the enemy, and there is a thick knot of fighting around the Persian chariots. Dead and dying men and horses lie everywhere, their ghosts escaping through the dust. Down by the beach, there is more fierce fighting. Where's Alexander? Says Charm, frantically searching the field. Can anyone see the king? Are we winning? Penthesilea smiles. Looks like it. The Persians are running away. See? She points to the mountains where small groups of men in yellow scarves are fleeing for their lives. But where's the king? Charm looks at the knot of men and horses around the chariots. I can't see him. He might have been killed. Not a chance, Penthesilea says, giving her a frown. If King Alexander were dead, the Macedonians would have stopped fighting. Come, I think we can risk going down now. As we get closer to the valley floor, a herd of blood-spattered Persians run up the slope toward us, looking over their shoulders. They don't notice us until we are upon them. The Amazons cut them down with their axes, and their ghosts ripple past us. Charm grips my mane and watches with a sick expression. Further down, bodies fill the gullies. I have to tread carefully to avoid stepping on them. Loose horses join us. I give them flat ears to send them to the back so they are not in the way. None of them put up a fight. They have all lost their riders, so they are ashamed. At the river, we find a detachment of Macedonians with their long pikes, weary but grinning. They're standing on a makeshift bridge. In the dusk, it takes me a moment to realize the bridge is made of Persian dead. Nearby, a horse lies in the water, spear sticking out of it. We snort sadly as we pass it. Queen Penthesilea questions the men about Alexander's whereabouts, but They don't seem to know much more than we do. Last I saw, he was leading the charge on King Darius's royal guard, says one. He's probably still up by the chariots. Nah, he went to help General Parmenio down by the beach. Don't be stupid. He was right here in the center, didn't you see? Cut down 100 Persians before my very eyes. Zeus was looking after him all right. I saw lightning flashing around his head. That was when you got hit in the head, you fool. Look sharp. Here come more Persian deserters. Without seeing us, the Persians jump down a little cliff on the far side of the river, only to find themselves trapped. Our men's long pikes soon release their ghosts, and the Amazons catch those who try to flee. I dance impatiently, trying to reach the enemy with my teeth and hooves as I have been trained to do, but the Amazon horses are in the way, and Charm holds me on a tight rein, flinching whenever another Persian dies. I reckon King Alexander must have killed King Darius, another Macedonian says, once they have finished off the Persians. That's why they're all running away, ain't it? Yeah, I heard they had a duel just like Achilles and Prince Hector did in the Iliad. King Darius wounded King Alexander, but King Alexander struggled up again and killed him. Charm gave a little gasp. Nonsense, says their officer, arriving on a mare covered in grime from the river. He gives me and Charm a frown, as if he thinks he should know us. I know who he is at once, because it's Zephyr under all that mud, who, if you remember, carries General Parmenio's son, Philotas. The little mare whinnies a weary greeting. I nicker to her in sympathy because I see she's had a hard battle. Alexander's gone chasing after King Darius, Philotas says. The Persian coward left his chariot behind, jumped on a fresh horse, and fled into the hills. He abandoned his men. That's why they're running. We're to mop up here and meet the king at the Persian camp when he decides to return. Watch out in the dark for more deserters. They're sneaky fellows. Queen Penthesilea nods and turns her horse, but Charm drags my head around and urges me after Zephyr. Which horse is the king riding? Philotas gives her an irritated look. How would I know? That big chestnut with a scar on its head, I think. Stupid grooms let its precious Bucephalus run off into the hills last night. The king wasn't too happy, I can tell you, especially after that business with the severed hands. Never seen him in such a mood as when he marched us all down here. I swear we could all feel his fury rippling right down along the line. I wouldn't want to be in King Darius's slippers when Alexander catches up with him, that's for sure. He drags Zephyr's head around and shouts at his men, who are leaning on their pikes discussing the battle. Get moving, you lot! The sooner we finish up here, the sooner you can all get your hands on some Persian loot and start celebrating. He still doesn't recognize me. I suppose I'm not looking my best. No one's groomed me since the Syrian gates, and I, too, am wearing a scruffy Amazon bridle. Charm looks a bit like an Amazon, too, since the queen painted blood on her cheek. Xanthus, she whispers to the queen, relieved. He'll be all right on Xanthus. He's almost as big as Bucephalus. Sometimes I think my groom understands nothing at all. The next section is called Zoroaster, and we're going to skip the first 2 paragraphs and start with the third. We passed an enormous pavilion, even fancier than King Alexander's. Macedonian guards stood with crossed pikes at the entrance, and soft weeping came from inside it. More guards stood around a huge chariot of gold, its shaft and footplate carved with pictures of monsters. Its wheel hubs glittered with huge red jewels. Queen Penthesilea rode across for a closer look, but a Macedonian pike blocked her way. Keep away, the man shouted. This is King Darius's tent. No one's to touch anything of his until King Alexander gets here. We found our grooms setting up the horse lines. I smelled Harpina and whinnied in delight. Little Hoplite bounded out, tail flicking, to greet us. The lines were not yet full. The horses who had been in the battle were tired and sweaty, and some had wounds their grooms were sponging clean. I couldn't smell any of the horses of the guard and started to worry, but as we neared the lines, Tydeus came running toward us, grinning. You found Bucephalus! Queen Penthesilea smiled and tactfully led her herd away to find a space for the Amazon camp, while Charm slid down from my back and threw herself into Tityos's arms. Where were you? He said, embarrassed but smiling in a funny way. I looked all over for you. We thought the Persians had captured you. They nearly did, but Bucephalus saved me, and then the Amazons came and killed the Persians who had grabbed me. I know Alexander will be furious when he finds me here, but I had to bring Bucephalus back. Is he in the camp? She stared around nervously, but Tityos shook his head. Not yet. He's still off chasing King Darius. Come and have something to eat. The Persians have left enough food and treasure to feed and clothe all Macedonia and half of Greece for 100 years. He pushed Charm's mane behind her ear and touched the smudged circle of blood on her cheek. Don't worry. We'll hide you when he comes back. No one will tell on you. It wasn't fair what he said to you, even if you did lie to him about your dream. He's the king. It was his decision to take the army to the Syrian gates, not yours. Come on, cheer up. We found the most incredible horse. I've already smelled him. He's tethered at the end of our horse line near my usual spot. He's white all over and nearly as big as me, though he's fat and soft, not hard and muscular like we war horses. His mane has been braided with silver threads, and his tail has little bells in it that tinkle whenever he flicks away a fly. He smells of flowers, and he looks ridiculous. I make myself huge and squeal at him. Charm gives a little gasp and tugs on my reins. No, Bucephalus, not another battle, please. But the white horse doesn't squeal back. He simply turns his big, dark eyes on us, pricks his ears, and stares at me. Then he gives a big sigh and goes back to his hay. This is most confusing. It's a male horse, but it acts more like a mare. It's supposed to be sacred to the sun, Tityos whispers. Part of King Darius's divine power or something. I don't know. The Persian captives say he's never carried anyone on his back, but he'll have to learn he's King Alexander's now. Charm strokes my nose. Don't worry, Bucephalus. Alexander still loves you the most. But she is interested in the white horse, I can tell. All the time as she settles me and rubs me down, she's looking at it. So gentle, she murmurs eventually. I wonder why Bucephalus didn't fight. It's not like him. Tityos laughs. You don't want to know the details. The Persians have taken his spirit away and given it to their god. It means he'll never be able to get a mare in full. They do the same thing to their male slaves, apparently, and they call us barbarians. Charm stares at the white horse. Oh, poor horse. I thought that was just a Scythian thing. And to think the old horsemaster tried to make Bucephalus fat and soft like him. What's his name? We've called him Zoroaster after the Persians' holy prophet. So that's what happens to a horse after the Scythian thing. You get to wear ridiculous silver bells, go fat and soft, and lose interest in fighting. It must be worse than a spiked bit after all. Forgiveness. Alexander did not catch the Persian king that night. The horses of the guard came back around midnight, their heads low and their coats caked in dried sweat and grime. Too tired to whinny, Ptasios and Borealis blew at me as Tityos tethered them beside me. Aura lay down immediately once her cloth was removed. Arion, Hades, and Apollo walked past the new horse without even noticing it and drank noisily from the buckets of water the grooms brought them from the river. Xanthus, who had been carrying Alexander, was in the worst state of all, with pain, and barely looked at me as he passed my swishing tail. He had a deep spear wound in his neck and dried blood all down his shoulder. I gave him a little squeal to let him know what I thought of him for challenging me in the hills earlier, but afterward I sent him a low whinny of sympathy to know show him I had forgiven him. I know what it's like after a big battle, when the excitement has worn off and you start to feel the pain of your wounds. Alexander would have caught King Darius easily if he had been riding at me, of course, but you can't blame Xanthus for being a bit slow. Charm and Tityos worked in silence until all the horses were watered, doctored, clean, fed, and settled. This took them the rest of the night, so Charm was dirty and tired by the time Alexander came to see us. This time he didn't come unannounced. Trumpets sounded, and the big golden chariot we had seen last night rumbled through the piles of Persian treasure glittering in the sunrise. Alexander stood in it, wearing a long purple cloak trimmed with gold. His mane had been freshly washed and was caught in a golden crown. Hephaestion drove the 2 Persian horses at a slow trot, so all the men could cheer their king. Sitting in the chariot behind Alexander was a small man-colt with a long black mane, holding a wiggling puppy in his arms. Charm wiped her hands on her filthy tunic and stood stiffly beside me. Tydeus squeezed her arm and stood between her and the chariot. Alexander called for Hephaestion to stop. He took a good look at me, then turned his attention to Charm. "I see you brought Bucephalus," he called. "Come here." Tydeus stiffened, but Charm took a deep breath and walked bravely up to the chariot where she bowed her head. Alexander looked down at her matted curls and her ragged scarf. He sighed and jumped down rather stiffly from the platform. His cloak billowed, and I saw he had a bandage around his thigh. Charm saw it too, and her eyes flickered from the bandage to his face. "It's nothing," Alexander waved a hand. "King Darius pricked me with his dagger, that's all. Here, Ochus." He pulled the man-colt to the side of the chariot and pointed to me. "See that horse? He's not as friendly as my dog. You can play with Perida, but you're not to go near Bucephalus. Understand? Dangerous horse, dangerous." He bared his teeth and mimed flat ears with his hand. The man-colt smiled. His eyes were black and curious. Alexander ruffled the man-colt's mane and sighed. "The boy doesn't understand a word, of course, but he'll soon learn Greek. Look out for him, Charmides. Don't let Bucephalus hurt him. He's a valuable hostage." I didn't know what a hostage was, but it couldn't have been too bad because Ochus was playing happily with this puppy Perida in the chariot. They were having a tug-of-war with one of the silly tassels the Persian horses wear on their bridles. Perida was winning. Alexander smelled faintly of flowers, but it didn't hide his familiar sherbet sweetness when he ran his hand down my nose. He had a stale honey cake in his pocket. I licked the crumbs greedily from his palm, and he smiled again. "Bucephalus, I missed you yesterday. Why did you have to run off like that? I wouldn't really dismiss your groom, you know." Charm, who was hovering near me, sucked in her breath and gave the king a flash of her eye. "Aren't you angry with me for coming back, sir?" Alexander laughed. "Angry? When you brought my Bucephalus back to me, how could anyone possibly be angry today? We won, didn't we?" His eyes shone. He patted my neck with a firm hand and spun around, arms spread wide, purple cloak flying. "Look at all this treasure. I bathed in King Darius's golden tub last night. I ate off a golden plate. And this isn't even half of it. The main Persian baggage train is still in Damascus. I've sent General Parmenio on ahead to collect it. King Darius has fled back to Persia. There's no one to stop me from marching straight down the coast to Egypt. But I can't have my horse undressed and my groom looking like a muleteer when we get there. This is for Bucephalus to wear on the march." He lifted a tasseled cloth out of the chariot and dumped it into Charm's arms. He hesitated, glanced at Hephaestion, then pulled from his pocket a length of purple silk, embroidered with gold thread, and draped it around her neck with a man-coltish grin. "And this scarf is for your hair. When you've cleaned yourself up, get Bucephalus ready for parade. We've a military funeral to take care of before we leave." Charm's cheeks flared red. Before she could speak, Alexander climbed back into his chariot and ordered Hephaestion to drive him around the rest of the camp. This was how we dominated the Persians at last. Persian dead, 2,000. Macedonian dead, 450. Horses dead, 150. Very sad, but pulling a chariot is like being tethered in battle, so the poor Persian horses didn't stand a chance. Hostages: King Darius's mother, wife, 2 daughters, his son Uckus, and Persian slipper-licking Memnon's wife, Lady Barsine. Before we left, Alexander renamed that little harbor town at the mouth of the river Alexandretta. I assume that means we've stopped liberating and started dominating again. Ha!